trusted begins to shake, when the people you believed in reveal their true colors, when the doors you thought would open slam in your face, when love turns silent and friends turn distant. And in that moment, God watches, not to see if you will survive, but to see if you will stay yourself. Because the greatest test of all is not what happens to you, it's what happens in you. The fact that you're here today tells me something. You passed. You stood when everything in you wanted to collapse. You smiled when tears were ready to flood your face. You kept walking when your soul was tempted to sit down and give up. That is honor. And heaven knows your name. You see, God never gives his greatest tests to the weakest hands. He gives them to women who have been prepared in silence. He gave it to you because he knew that pain would not poison you, loss would not define you, and betrayal would not destroy you. He knew that when the storm came, you would not bow to the wind. You would stand until the clouds broke. Passing God's hardest tests is not about pretending you don't feel. It's about feeling everything, the hurt, the disappointment, the loneliness, and yet refusing to let those feelings decide your direction. Emotional detachment is not a cold heart. It is a guarded heart. It is the ability to look at a situation that once controlled you and say, you no longer have the power to pull me away from who God says I am. There's a moment in the test where you have to decide, will I live for people or will I live for purpose? And you chose purpose. You chose to let go of what wanted to control you. You chose to anchor yourself to the truth that even if they walk away, God still stays. That's the moment you moved from surviving to reigning. You also learned something else, that spiritual detachment is not walking away from love, it's walking away from chains. It's refusing to remain in environments, conversations, and connections that choke the very breath of your destiny. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who had already decided they couldn't see it. You stop chasing after doors that God himself had locked. You didn't just leave, you rose. And woman, let me tell you, your victory was not in what you gained. Your victory was in what you refused to lose. You refused to lose your joy. You refused to lose your dignity. You refused to lose your worship. And because of that, you carry a crown that cannot be seen with human eyes, but is recognized by heaven and feared by hell. When you pass the test, you receive something greater than applause. You receive clarity. You can now see people as they are, not as you wished them to be. You can walk into a room without wondering who likes you, because you are too busy knowing who sent you. And you can love without becoming a prisoner to the one you love, because your heart belongs to God first. You walked through the fire and you did not come out bitter. You came out better. You came out not empty, but full of wisdom, full of strength, full of the kind of beauty that no storm can steal. And that, my sister, is what it means to pass God's hardest test with honor. When God gives you the hardest test, it is never to destroy you, but to reveal you. Many people see trials as punishment, but in heaven's courtroom, trials are proof. They are the evidence that God has placed a deposit of strength, wisdom, and endurance inside you that needs to be seen. The test you faced was not random. It was assigned, and assignments are always given based on capacity. God knew exactly how deep the valley would be, how heavy the weight would feel, and how long the night would last. Yet he chose you because he saw what you could not see, that within you was the resilience to endure and the faith to finish. When you were in the middle of that storm, you may have wondered why it felt so personal, why it seemed like the battle was harder for you than for others. That's because God wasn't giving you an ordinary trial. He was giving you a proving ground. Just as gold is tested by fire, your life was placed in the furnace not to burn you, but to purify you. Every tear you cried, every time you bit your tongue when you could have fought back, every moment you held on to faith when it would have been easier to let go, all of that was part of the refining process. God's hardest tests strip away false strength and reveal true strength. They take away the props you thought you needed so you can stand on the only foundation that cannot be shaken, Him. This is why after the test, you didn't just survive. You emerge with a different kind of authority, the kind that comes from having been trusted with pain and having carried it with grace. You didn't just pass, you passed with honor. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many think it means becoming numb, cold, or disconnected from life. But in truth, it is the highest form of emotional mastery. It is the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. It is choosing to respond instead of react, to hold your peace when chaos demands your attention, and to stay anchored in truth, even when emotions try to drag you away. Passing God's hardest test required you to master this discipline. You could have allowed anger to consume you, bitterness to harden you, or fear to paralyze you, but instead you learned how to guard your heart without closing it off. Emotional detachment is not about rejecting love or relationships. It is about creating a healthy distance between your identity and your emotions so that you are not defined by temporary states of the heart. You understood that your feelings are real, but they are not always right. You recognize that if you let your emotions drive your decisions, you could easily be led away from your purpose. So you took back the steering wheel.
Our wide selection of Toyota certified used vehicles comes with great surprises, like warranties backed by Toyota.
Whoa, I could.
And placed it firmly in the hands of God's wisdom. This kind of strength is forged only in the heat of adversity. When betrayal tried to make you bitter, you chose peace. When disappointment whispered that you were a failure, you chose to stand tall. When loss tempted you to shut down completely, you decided to love again, but with discernment. Emotional detachment gave you the freedom to be compassionate without being manipulated, to be kind without being used, and to be available without being drained. It became your silent armor, allowing you to navigate life's storms without losing your center, and that is why you emerge from the test unshaken. There comes a turning point in every great test when you must decide who you are truly living for. Passing the hardest test required you to shift your allegiance from people to purpose. For so long, you may have measured your worth by the approval, acceptance, or affirmation of others. You wanted to be understood, to be liked, to be validated. But when the test came, those very people whose opinions once mattered so much either misunderstood you, turned against you, or remained silent. It was in that painful space that you discovered a deeper truth, that your life's value does not come from the crowd, but from the one who called you. Living for people makes you a prisoner to their expectations, but living for purpose makes you free. You realize that if you keep chasing human approval, you will always be at the mercy of their changing moods, biases, and limitations. But when you anchor yourself in the assignment God has placed in your hands, you no longer bend with every opinion. Your yes belongs to Him, and your no is no longer apologetic. This shift wasn't easy. It meant letting go of certain relationships that were built on pleasing others rather than fulfilling your calling. It meant disappointing people who were comfortable with you staying small. It meant being misunderstood by those who could not see the bigger picture of your destiny. But in making that shift, you stepped into a higher realm of clarity and confidence. You stopped asking, do they approve? And started asking, does this align with my purpose? And in doing so, you became unshakable. Because a woman who lives for God's purpose can no longer be controlled by man's opinion. That is how you passed with honor. Spiritual detachment is not about closing your heart to love. It is about